I'd like to first qualify my question before making it. So, Mr. Shapiro, as a conservative intellectual, I respect you deeply, and I agree with you on a host of issues. However, there is one where I disagree with you, which is what we should do about climate change. While I agree with you that we should be skeptical of climate alarmists, I cannot help but think of Pascal's wager. If the skeptics are right, we have nothing to lose. But if they are wrong, then we have a world to lose. In a 1984 election advertisement, Ronald Reagan's campaign said, if you think there's a bear in the woods, you bring your gun. Given this maxim and Reagan's decision to protect the ozone layer by limiting CFCs via the Montreal Protocol at a time when the science was very much split on whether or not the ozone layer could ever be repaired, would you support a revenue-neutral carbon tax that would be revenue-neutral in the sense that the tax would be balanced by lowering of taxes on like businesses and on individuals and things like that? Do you think that this would be a good insurance policy that would not necessarily give the command economists of the left what they want, but also entertain the possibility that maybe climate change is real and maybe we should do something about it?
Okay, so here's my position on climate change. I would say lukewarm on climate change in the sense that I think that the greenhouse gas effect has been proven in laboratories, that carbon emissions can make the world warmer. The question is the sensitivity of the climate to those greenhouse gas emissions, how much is absorbed by the oceans, for example, and what effect that has on the climate long term, because the computer modeling has been so flawed thus far. That said, even if you believe that let's say that we take the IPCC estimate, right? The IPCC estimate is that we're supposed to increase, I think, by the end of the century by 7 degrees Fahrenheit is the global estimate. So that varies obviously place to place. That also means that you have to take into account cost, right? So as far as a carbon tax, I haven't actually looked at the economics of what you're talking about specifically enough, but general regulations that have been proposed on carbon taxes talk about penalizing companies in such a way that the cost is passed on to the consumer. It seems to me that if you're going to create new taxes without dramatically lowering taxes, as you suggest, which is really what the left proposes, the left sort of proposes carbon taxes but no offsets, then you're going to end up with a situation where the cost of energy is passed on to the consumer, which leaves more people in poverty. And I think that pretending that there are no trade-offs when it comes to government regulation is foolhardy. I also think that the truth is that what we've seen is that greenhouse gas emissions are declining thanks to technological development. For example, the easiest way to lower greenhouse gas emissions right now would be to build a bunch of nuclear power plants, which is something that the left in California has opposed for a very, very long time. We haven't had a nuclear power plant here for like 40 years. If you look at the rise of Tesla, the idea that there's not new technologies around the corner that are going to help us mitigate the emissions is foolhardy to me. I think that when Reagan says, bring a gun into the woods, if you see a bear, the question isn't whether you bring a gun into the woods, the question is whether, or if you suspect that a bear is there. The question isn't whether to bring a gun into the woods right now, based on the economists that I've looked at. The question is whether you should randomly wander around the woods in a tank. Right? Is that worthwhile? Because the kind of solutions that it seems the left is suggesting are necessary in order to actually curb what they think is coming are so dramatic that you would talk about really dramatically lowering the American and the global standard of living in order to combat an ill that may or may not happen. And even if it does happen, maybe easier to deal with 100 years from now. Our technology 100 years from now is going to be a lot better. And the idea, by the way, that people don't move populations is not true. I mean, population movement has been a consistent thing throughout human history.
Right, but what I'm specifically advocating for here is that the right come up with its own policy in service of solving climate change. Because right now, the discussion has been dominated by the type of people that you're talking about, who want to bring tanks into the forest randomly. Why I'm suggesting this carbon tax that is revenue neutral, that should be supported by conservatives, is because it is a better solution to a lot of what we're seeing on the left. And I think that conservative intellectuals like yourself, who have a lot of sway and who have media companies, could advertise this policy.
So I'd be happy to look. If you're asking me if I'll look at your proposal, the answer is yes. If you send me your proposal, I'll be happy to look at it. But I think that it's worth noting that there are actually 3 positions, right? One is that the free market and new efficiencies and new technologies will help curb this on its own, and that government regulation may not be the answer. Then there's the hard left position, which is we should take over everything. And then there's the position that you're advocating. So I'll have to look at your position and see where I think it stacks up in the vast scheme of things. But environmental regulations, I don't know many conservatives who are not in favor of some, at least minimal environmental regulations, because those are externalities that affect people beyond you, obviously.